There are moments that change everything. Moments when a single sentence can shatter years of silence and carefully maintained dignity. That September evening, with everyone watching, my son looked at me with a cruel smile and asked, "How does it feel to be completely useless, Mom?" I smiled back at him and replied with something he never expected me to say. "It feels like never having to pay your rent again." His face turned pale. His wife Audrey choked on her wine and shrieked, "What rent? What rent are you talking about? My name is Hazel Thompson. I'm 59 years old, a retired high school English teacher, a widow for 12 years, and the mother of an only son whom I loved more than my own life. For 5 long years, I silently paid 1/200 each month toward the rent for the apartment where my son lived with his wife. 5 years of keeping a secret he had begged and pleaded with me to maintain. And that night, in front of Audrey's family, in front of her parents from Greenwich, Connecticut, in front of her elegant sisters with their designer dresses and glasses of expensive wine, that secret tumbled out of my mouth like a sigh of freedom. But to understand that night, I need to go back 5 years to where it all began. I live in a modest 2-bedroom house in Queens that I've owned for 30 years. It's the same house where I raised Owen alone after his father, Michael, died of a sudden heart attack when our son was only 8 years old. The mortgage has paid off one of the few blessings of my financial situation, and my small backyard has been my sanctuary. There's a wooden bench beneath a wisteria vine I planted the day Owen was born. That vine has grown thick and strong over the decades, its purple flowers cascading like a waterfall every spring. After Michael died, I worked 2 jobs to ensure Owen had everything he needed. I taught English at the local high school during the day and tutored students in the evenings. Every dollar I earned went toward providing Owen with opportunities, a good education, SAT prep classes, soccer team fees, college application costs, and eventually his tuition at NYU's engineering program. When he graduated with honors, I felt all those years of sacrifice had been worth it. I sat in the audience, tears streaming down my face as he crossed the stage in his cap and gown. He looked for me in the crowd, and when our eyes met, he smiled. That smile had held all the love and pride a mother could hope for. "I couldn't have done this without you, Mom," he told me that night over dinner at a small Italian restaurant I'd saved up to take him to. "One day I'll pay you back for everything." I told him what all mothers tell their children, "Just be happy. That's all the payback I need." For a while, he was doing well. Owen secured a job at a respected engineering firm in Manhattan. His starting salary was modest but solid, around $75,000. He visited me regularly on Sundays, and we'd have coffee under the wisteria talking about his projects, his colleagues, his dreams. He was an independent, hard-working young man who seemed to have inherited his father's integrity and my practicality. He lived in a small apartment in Astoria with 2 roommates, saved diligently, and even helped me replace my aging refrigerator when it broke down one summer. I was proud of him. So proud. Then at 32, Owen met Audrey. "Mom, I've met someone special," he told me one Sunday, his eyes bright with excitement. "Her name is Audrey. She works in public relations for a luxury hotel chain." I was genuinely happy for him. At his age, I was already married with a toddler, and I had begun to worry he was too focused on his career to find a partner. "Tell me about her," I said, pouring him another cup of coffee. "She's amazing, Mom. Smart, beautiful, sophisticated. She graduated from Vassar, and her family has this gorgeous house in Greenwich. Her father is an investment banker, and her mother runs a charitable foundation." I noticed the slight change in his tone, a new cadence, as if he were reciting credentials rather than describing a person. "She sounds impressive," I said carefully. "But what is she like as a person?" "She's perfect," he replied, and there was something in his voice that made me pause. It wasn't just love I heard. It was awe tinged with insecurity. A month later, Owen brought Audrey to dinner at my house. I spent the entire day preparing dusting my grandmother's china that I only used for special occasions, polishing the silver flatware Michael and I had received as wedding gifts, making my signature roast chicken with herbs from my garden. Audrey was certainly beautiful, tall and slender, with perfectly styled blonde hair, expertly applied makeup, and a crisp white blouse that probably cost more than my entire outfit. She greeted me with a practiced smile and air-kissed both of my cheeks. "Mrs. Thompson, it's so lovely to finally meet you. Owen talks about you constantly." Her voice was pleasant, but measured, as if each word had been carefully selected before leaving her mouth. She handed me a bottle of wine that I immediately recognized was expensive, though I knew little about fine wines. Please call me Hazel, I said, accepting the wine with a genuine smile. And thank you for this. It looks special. Oh, it's just something Daddy brought back from Napa last summer. Nothing fancy. But it was fancy, and we all knew it. Throughout dinner, I watched Audrey assess my home, her gaze lingering on my old but well-maintained furniture. The crocheted throw pillows I'd made years ago, the watercolor landscapes I'd collected from local artists. She didn't say anything overtly rude, but her eyes said plenty. Your home is so quaint, she commented in the way someone might describe a charming but outdated museum exhibit. Very authentic. Owen shifted uncomfortably but said nothing to defend my home or me. He just smiled nervously and steered the conversation toward neutral territory. After dessert, when Audrey excused herself to use the restroom, I caught Owen straightening a stack of books on my coffee table, as if suddenly embarrassed by the slight disorder. She seems very polished, I said quietly. Isn't she amazing? He whispered back, his eyes following the direction she'd gone. I can hardly believe she chose me. That phrase, chose me, sat uneasily in my stomach, as if he were the lucky recipient of a prize rather than one equal half of a partnership. When they left that evening, Owen hugged me tightly. She liked you, he assured me, though I wasn't convinced. She's very pretty, I replied, choosing my words carefully. But most importantly, does she make you happy? Happier than I've ever been, he answered quickly. Too quickly. In the weeks that followed, I noticed subtle changes in my son. He arrived for Sunday coffee in designer clothes instead of his usual jeans and button-downs. His old reliable watch was replaced by something sleek and expensive-looking. He traded his practical phone for the latest model. He mentioned restaurants in Tribeca and Soho that I knew were well beyond a mid-level engineer's typical budget. How's work? I asked one Sunday, wondering if he'd received a significant promotion or raise I hadn't heard about. It's good. Busy, he replied vaguely. Are you managing okay with all these new expenses? Those restaurants you mentioned sound quite pricey. His expression clouded briefly. I'm fine, Mom. I earn enough. Don't worry about me. But I did worry. I knew his salary range. I knew the cost of living in New York. The math wasn't adding up. 3 months after I met Audrey, Owen announced they were engaged. We're planning the wedding for June, he told me excitedly. Nothing too extravagant, just about 100 people at the Bennett family's country club in Connecticut. 100 people at a country club didn't sound modest to me, but I kept that thought to myself. I'm happy for you, I said, and I meant it despite my reservations. Your father would be proud. Thanks, Mom. He hesitated, then added, Audrey's parents are covering most of the wedding costs. They insist. I nodded, relieved, but also strangely uneasy. There's a particular feeling that comes with accepting generosity when you sense strings are attached invisible but binding nonetheless. The engagement party was held at the Bennett's Greenwich home, a sprawling colonial with manicured gardens and a view of the Long Island Sound. I wore my best dress, a navy blue sheath I'd purchased 3 years earlier for a colleague's retirement dinner, and my mother's pearl earrings. I'd had my hair done at the local salon and splurged on a professional manicure. Still, as soon as I stepped into the Bennett's marble-floored foyer, I felt woefully underdressed. The women wore cocktail dresses that shimmered as they moved, and the men were in tailored suits that probably cost more than my monthly pension. Mom, Owen spotted me and came over looking handsome in a new suit I'd never seen before. You made it. Let me introduce you around. He guided me through clusters of people, all of whom smiled politely and promptly forgot my name. I met Audrey's parents, William and Catherine Bennett, who assessed me with the same measuring gaze their daughter had used in my home. So you were a teacher, Catherine said, making it sound like I'd been a professional juggler. Yes, high school English for 32 years, I replied. How rewarding that must have been, she commented in a tone that suggested rewarding was a consolation prize for not lucrative. William nodded absently, already looking over my shoulder for someone more important to talk to. Later, I overheard 2 of Audrey's friends whispering near the buffet. That's Owen's mother. She looks so ordinary. I know. And did you see her purse? It's from like Macy's or something. Well, at least Owen didn't inherit her fashion sense. I pretended not to hear, loading my plate with tiny hors d'oeuvres that didn't look like they would satisfy anyone's hunger. Throughout the evening, I watched Owen navigate the crowd with increasing confidence, adopting speech patterns and mannerisms that weren't his own, laughing a bit too loudly at William's jokes, nodding seriously during discussions about the stock market that I knew he barely understood. Audrey glided through the party like a queen, occasionally resting her hand possessively on Owen's arm, steering him toward people she deemed important. Each time they approached a new group, she would introduce him as my fiancé the engineer, as if his profession alone legitimized his presence among them. At one point, I found myself alone on the terrace, grateful for the momentary escape from the performative socializing inside. I was admiring the garden when Audrey's sister Claire joined me. "It's a bit much in there, isn't it?" she said, nodding toward the house. I smiled cautiously. "It's a lovely party." "It's a showcase," Claire replied with unexpected candor. "My parents excel at showcases." She studied me for a moment. "Owen seems like a good guy, different from Audrey's usual type. Her usual type, trust fund babies with more connections than common sense." She sipped her champagne. "Owen actually seems to have a brain and a work ethic. It's refreshing." I felt a surge of pride followed quickly by confusion. "Then why is Audrey interested?" Claire finished for me. "Because Owen worships her, and that's Audrey's favorite quality in a man." She gave me a sad smile. "Just keep an eye on him, Mrs. Thompson. My sister has a way of reshaping people until they barely recognize themselves." Before I could respond, she was called away by her mother, leaving me with a chill that had nothing to do with the evening breeze. When Owen drove me home that night, he was exuberant. "Wasn't it amazing, Mom, the Bennetts really know how to throw a party?" "It was very elegant," I agreed. "Everyone was very impressive. William is going to introduce me to some of his colleagues. He thinks I might be a good fit for some of the engineering firms they work with. Better paying than my current job." "That's generous of him," I said carefully. "But you've built a good reputation at your current firm. Sometimes it's better to grow where you're planted." Owen frowned slightly. "Mom, these are opportunities most engineers would kill for. William has connections everywhere." "I'm sure he does," I conceded. "Just make sure any move you make is for the right reasons, not just for a bigger paycheck or to impress your in-laws." "I know what I'm doing," he said with a touch of irritation that was becoming increasingly common in our conversations. "I have a plan." But as he pulled up to my house, I couldn't help but wonder whose plan he was actually following. The weeks after the engagement party brought more changes. Owen started skipping our Sunday coffees. Audrey had brunch plans. They were looking at potential apartments. They were meeting her parents' friends for tennis. When he did visit, his conversation was peppered with references to people and places I didn't know, galas at the Met weekends and the Hamptons restaurants where you simply must know the maitre d' to get a table. I listened and nodded, increasingly aware of the growing distance between us, not just in lifestyle but in values. The practical, grounded son I had raised was being replaced by someone who seemed to measure his worth by his proximity to wealth and status. One rainy Sunday in May, a month before the wedding, Owen finally made it to our coffee date. He looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes that his expensive new haircut couldn't distract from. "Everything okay with wedding planning?" I asked as I set a cup of coffee in front of him. "It's fine, just a lot of details." He stirred his coffee absently. "Audrey has very specific ideas about everything." "That's understandable. It's her big day." "Our big day," he corrected, but without conviction. We sat in silence for a moment, listening to the rain patter against the windows. The wisteria was in full bloom, but the weather kept us inside. "Mom," he finally said, not meeting my eyes, "I need to ask you for something." Owen had that look I'd known since he was a child, the one that appeared when he wanted something significant but was afraid to ask. He fidgeted with his spoon, turning it over and over in his fingers. "Audrey and I found an apartment on the Upper West Side," he began. "It's perfect, 2 bedrooms doorman building close to the park." "That sounds lovely," I said, though I already sensed where this was heading. "It's in a great neighborhood, the kind of place Audrey is used to. Her parents' friends live nearby." "And the rent?" I asked directly. He hesitated. $3,500 a month." I nearly choked on my coffee. $3,500, Owen, that's more than twice what you're paying now." "I know, but Audrey doesn't want to live in Astoria, and we need space for when we entertain." "That's a lot of money for someone at your level at the firm," I said carefully. He looked down at his hands. That's what I wanted to talk to you about." My heart sank as I realized what was coming. I can manage about $2,300 of it right now, he continued. But I need help with the rest. Just $1,200 a month until I get a better position or a raise. It would only be for a year, maybe less. Owen, I said slowly, that's a significant amount of money. My pension isn't that large. I know, Mom, I know, but I can't ask Audrey's parents for help. They already think I'm successful enough to provide the lifestyle she's accustomed to. If they found out I couldn't afford it, then maybe you should look for something more affordable, I suggested gently. There are nice neighborhoods with lower rents. You don't understand, he said, frustration edging into his voice. Audrey has already told her parents about this place. She's already decorated it in her mind. Her sisters have apartments in the same area. If we move somewhere else less everyone will know I can't afford what they can. And that matters more than living within your means. In their world, yes. He leaned forward, his expression earnest. Mom, I love her. I want to make her happy. I want to fit into her life. But at what cost, Owen? Not just financially, but to your integrity. Starting a marriage with deception doesn't seem wise. It's not deception, he argued. It's temporary assistance. I'll pay you back, I swear. And Audrey doesn't need to know. It would just hurt her pride to think I needed help. I looked at my son, my brilliant, hard-working son, who had somehow been convinced that his worth was measured by his address and the brands he wore. Please, Mom, he said softly. Just for a year. I thought about the money I'd saved for retirement, for medical expenses, for the repairs my aging house would eventually need. I thought about the trips I'd planned to take now that I had the time. I thought about the sensible advice I would give to anyone else in my position. Then I looked at my son's pleading eyes. All right, I said finally. 1 year. But Owen will need to revisit this arrangement when the year is up. Relief washed over his face. Thank you, Mom. Thank you so much. I promise it's just temporary. There's one more thing. He added, his expression growing serious. Audrey can't know about this. She'd be devastated if she thought I couldn't support us on my own. It would make me look like a failure. Owen, married couples should be honest about finances. We will be eventually, when I'm earning more. Please, Mom, this has to be our secret. Against my better judgment, I nodded. Our secret. He hugged me tightly, and for a moment he was my little boy again, grateful for a Band-Aid on a scraped knee. But as he pulled away, I saw something in his eyes that troubled me, not just relief, but a flicker of something else. Entitlement, perhaps, as if my sacrifice was something he had coming to him. After he left, I sat alone at my kitchen table and did the calculations. $200 a month would significantly impact my modest lifestyle. I would need to cut back on groceries, cancel my weekly water aerobics class, forget about the new winter coat I'd been saving for. The small trips I'd planned to visit my sister in Florida to see the fall foliage in Vermont would have to wait. But it was only for a year, I reasoned. Just 12 months of sacrifice to help my son establish his marriage. Surely I could manage that. I made the first transfer the following week, sending $1,200 to Owen's account. I set up a recurring monthly transfer for the first of every month. As I confirmed the transaction, a small voice in the back of my mind whispered that I was making a mistake. I silenced it. It was just for a year, just 12 months. That's what I told myself. The wedding went ahead as planned at the Bennett's Country Club. It was elegant and tasteful, with floral arrangements that must have cost thousands and a 5-course meal served by white-gloved waiters. I wore a new dress I couldn't really afford, but bought anyway because I couldn't bear the thought of Audrey's family judging me in my old navy sheath. At the reception, I danced one dance with Owen, both of us teary-eyed as we swayed to the same song that had played at my wedding to his father. I'm so proud of you, I told him. Your father would be too. Thanks, Mom, he whispered. For everything. I thought he meant my years of sacrifice raising him alone. Looking back, I think he was referring to the money. After the honeymoon 2 weeks in the Amalfi Coast that I knew stretched his credit cards to their limits, Owen and Audrey settled into their Upper West Side apartment. I wasn't invited to see it until 3 months after they moved in, and even then it was a brief visit when Audrey was out at a spa day with her sisters. This is lovely, I said, admiring the high ceilings and crown molding. The furniture was all new and coordinated perfectly clearly, Audrey's taste nothing like the eclectic, comfortable style Owen had preferred in his previous apartments. It's great, right? Owen said. But there was a tension in his shoulders as he showed me around, as if he was afraid I might touch something or disturb the perfect order of the place. Audrey worked with a decorator her mother uses. I wondered how much that had cost, but didn't ask. "When will I get to see Audrey?" I asked as the tour concluded without an offer of tea or coffee. "She's really busy with work and social commitments," Owen said vaguely. "But soon, definitely." As the months passed, soon never seemed to arrive. Our Sunday coffee tradition dwindled to monthly phone calls, then occasional texts. Owen always had a reason why he couldn't visit Audrey, had brunch plans with her college friends. They were attending a gallery opening. They had dinner with her parents. I adjusted to my new financial reality. I started shopping at discount grocery stores, buying store brands instead of name brands. I canceled my modest gym membership and began walking in the local park for exercise instead. When my ancient washing machine finally gave up, I started going to the laundromat rather than replacing it. I told myself these were small sacrifices, temporary inconveniences. The important thing was that Owen was establishing himself in his marriage. But the first real fracture came on Mother's Day, 6 months after the wedding. I had been looking forward to it for weeks. Owen had promised to bring Audrey for lunch. I spent days planning the menu, settling on my special herb-roasted chicken, Owen's favorite since childhood. I splurged on ingredients I couldn't really afford: fresh herbs, organic vegetables, a good bottle of wine. I set the table with my grandmother's linen tablecloth, polished the silver, and bought fresh flowers for a centerpiece. At noon, everything was ready. I had even made a lemon tart for dessert, another of Owen's favorites. At 1:00 p.m., the food was getting cold, but I kept it warm in the oven. At 2:00 p.m., I texted Owen, "Are you running late?" At 2:30 p.m., my phone finally rang. "Mom, I'm so sorry." Owen's voice sounded harried. "Audrey's mother organized a Mother's Day brunch at their club and didn't tell us until this morning. We're committed now. I can't get out of it." "But we had plans," I said, trying to keep the hurt from my voice. "I know, and I feel terrible. But Catherine went to a lot of trouble, and Audrey would be upset if we left now." There was muffled speaking in the background. "I have to go, Mom. I'll make it up to you next weekend, I promise." He hung up before I could respond. I sat alone at my carefully set table, looking at the meal no one would eat at the Flowers beginning to droop in the afternoon heat. For the first time in many years, I allowed myself to cry. Not dainty tears, but deep, racking sobs that left me exhausted. It wasn't about the food or even the broken plan. It was the realization that I was no longer a priority in my son's life. I had been replaced not just by his wife, which would have been natural and expected, but by her entire world, a world that had no room for a retired schoolteacher from Queens. I put the food away in containers, eating small portions of it alone throughout the week. Each bite tasted like disappointment. True to his word, Owen did come the following Sunday. He arrived with flowers and chocolates full of apologies. "It was a complete misunderstanding," he explained. "I thought Catherine had checked with us before arranging the brunch." "It's all right," I said, accepting his hug. "These things happen." But as we sat having coffee, I noticed he checked his phone every few minutes, clearly anxious to leave. "Is everything okay?" I asked. "Fine, just fine. Audrey and I have tickets to a show this afternoon. Off-Broadway thing her friend is in." "I see." I hesitated, then decided to broach the subject we had both been avoiding. "Owen, it's been almost a year since I started helping with the rent." He stiffened almost imperceptibly. "Has it been a year already? Next month we'll make 12 payments. Right. He fidgeted with his watch, a new one I hadn't seen before, clearly expensive. "About that, Mom. Things are still a bit tight right now. I just paid for Audrey's professional development course. It's going to help her move up at her firm. Could we maybe extend our arrangement a little longer? Just a few more months." My heart sank. "Owen, we agreed on 1 year. My finances are stretched thin as it is. I have home repairs I've been putting off, medical checkups I've delayed." He looked genuinely surprised, as if the idea that I might be struggling had never occurred to him. "I didn't realize. You never said anything." "You never asked," I pointed out gently. He had the grace to look ashamed, but only briefly. "I'm under a lot of pressure, Mom. Audrey has expectations. Her friends' husbands all earn much more than I do." "Then perhaps you and Audrey should have an honest conversation about your financial reality." "I can't do that," he said quickly. "Not now. Things are finally going well with her parents. William is considering recommending me for a position at his friend's firm. It could change everything for us. And when would that happen? Soon. A few months, maybe. I sighed, already knowing I would give in. 3 more months, Owen. That's all I can manage. Relief flooded his face. Thank you, Mom. I promise just 3 more months. He left shortly after rushing to meet Audrey. I stood at the window watching him drive away in a newer, more expensive car than the one he'd had before the wedding. Another expense he couldn't afford, I suspected. I moved slowly around the kitchen, washing our coffee cups, putting away the cookies I'd baked that morning. My knee was bothering me more than usual, a persistent ache that the doctor had said might require physical therapy. Therapy I couldn't afford because I was sending $1.200 each month to my son. 3 more months, I thought. Just 3 more months. But deep down I was beginning to understand that this arrangement had no end date, that Owen had stepped onto a treadmill of appearances and expectations that required constant financial fuel he didn't have. And as long as I remained willing to provide it, he would continue to take it. The question was, how long could I keep giving before there was nothing left? 3 months turned into 6, 6 into 9. Each time the agreed-upon deadline approached, Owen had a reason why he needed just a little more time. Audrey's car needed expensive repairs. The co-op board had raised their maintenance fees. There was an opportunity to invest in a friend's startup that he couldn't pass up, and each time I relented. By the 2nd year of payments, my financial situation had deteriorated significantly. I had depleted my modest emergency fund. I was putting off necessary dental work because I couldn't afford the copay. The roof had developed a small leak that I patched temporarily with materials from the hardware store, knowing I couldn't afford a proper repair. My physical health was suffering too. The pain in my knees had worsened to the point where I sometimes used a cane for longer walks. My doctor had recommended a series of physical therapy sessions, but my insurance would only cover part of the cost. I would need to pay $75 per session out of pocket. That was $300 a month I didn't have. You really need this treatment, Hazel, Dr. Patel told me during my annual checkup. The arthritis is progressing, and without intervention, your mobility will continue to decline. I understand, I said. I'll think about it. But there was nothing to think about. The math was simple and brutal. $1.200 to Owen left nothing for physical therapy. My social circle had contracted as well. I declined invitations to dinners or outings with friends, embarrassed to admit I couldn't afford even modest entertainment. My friend Evelyn Martinez, a fellow retired teacher, had grown increasingly concerned. Hazel, you haven't been to book club in months, she commented one day when she stopped by unexpectedly, catching me in the middle of mending a tear in my winter coat rather than replacing it. And you keep turning down our lunch invitations. I've been busy, I lied, setting aside my needle and thread. Too busy for the theater trip next month. We've been planning it since last year. I shook my head. I don't think I can make it, Ev. It's only $200 for the whole day bus show dinner. We can even share a hotel room to save money. It's not a good time, I said vaguely. Evelyn sat down across from me at the kitchen table, her expression serious. Hazel Thompson, I've known you for 30 years. Something's going on. Are you in some kind of financial trouble? I considered lying again, but found I didn't have the energy. Things are a bit tight right now. How tight do you need a loan? No loans, I said quickly. I'm just helping Owen with some expenses while he gets established in his career. Established, he's 34 years old and works as an engineer. Shouldn't he be helping you at this point? I bristled slightly at her tone. It's temporary. He's making connections through Audrey's family that could lead to better opportunities. Evelyn's expression softened. Hazel, honey, are you sure Owen isn't taking advantage of your generosity? When was the last time he visited you? I had to think about it. 3 weeks ago. No, a month. And before that, he's very busy, Ev. Audrey has a lot of social obligations. Too busy for his mother. The woman who raised him alone after Michael died. The woman who worked 2 jobs to put him through college. There was an edge to her voice now. You don't understand, I said defensively. Their world has different expectations, different pressures. I understand perfectly, Evelyn replied, her eyes sad. You're sacrificing your well-being to maintain their illusion, and Owen is letting you do it. Her words stung because they contained a truth I wasn't ready to acknowledge. It's what mothers do, I said weakly. We sacrifice for our children. To a point, Hazel. To a point. But not to our own detriment. Not when they're grown adults fully capable of supporting themselves. She took my hand. What would Michael say if he could see this? The mention of my late husband brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Michael had been so practical, so grounded. He would have seen through Owen's excuses immediately. He would never have allowed our son to drain me financially while living beyond his means. He would be disappointed, I admitted in a whisper. In Owen, yes, but also in you for enabling it. I pulled my hand away, suddenly angry. You have no right to judge my relationship with my son. I'm not judging, Evelyn said gently. I'm worried about you, your health, your future. What happens when you really need that money for medical care? For home repairs, will Owen be there for you then? I didn't answer because I didn't know. The Owen I had raised would have been. The Owen who now existed in Audrey's world, I wasn't sure. After Evelyn left, I sat under the wisteria in my backyard, watching the purple flowers sway in the breeze. The vine was nearly 35 years old now, as old as Owen. I had nurtured it, tended it, watched it grow strong and beautiful, just as I had with my son. But somewhere along the way, something had gone wrong. The values I thought I had instilled in him, honesty, responsibility, living within one's means, had been supplanted by a desperate desire to belong in a world that measured worth by material possessions and addresses. That evening, I did something I'd never done before. I calculated the total amount I had given Owen over the past 2 years, $28,800, nearly $30,000 from my limited retirement funds. Money that should have been securing my future was instead financing my son's facade of success. The following Sunday, Owen called to cancel our planned visit. Audrey had surprised him with tickets to a Broadway show, followed by dinner with friends. I'll come next weekend for sure, Mom, he promised. Owen, I said, gathering my courage. We need to talk about the financial arrangement. Oh. His tone immediately became guarded. What about it? It's been 2 years, not the 1 year you originally asked for. I'm struggling, Owen. My knee pain has gotten worse, and I need physical therapy I can't afford. The roof needs repairs. Mom, I know, and I feel terrible about it, he interrupted. But I'm this close to a breakthrough. William has practically guaranteed me an interview at Stanfield Engineering. The starting salary would be at least 50% more than I'm making now. When would this happen? In the next few months. They have a project starting in the fall that I'd be perfect for. That's what you said 6 months ago, Owen, and 6 months before that. This time it's real, Mom. I promise. Just a little longer. I closed my eyes, leaning heavily on my cane, though he couldn't see it through the phone. I don't know if I can, Owen. I've already given you almost $30,000. There was a pause. You've been keeping track. The surprise in his voice spoke volumes. He had never intended to pay me back. The money had become an expectation, not a loan. Of course I've kept track, I said quietly. It's a significant amount of money for me. I know, Mom, I know, and I'm grateful truly. Just a few more months, okay? By Christmas, I'll be in a position to not only stop asking for help, but to start paying you back. Christmas. 6 more months. Another $7,200. Could I manage it? I need to think about it, Owen. Mom, please. And now there was an edge of panic in his voice. We're already committed to the apartment through December. Breaking the lease would cost a fortune. Then perhaps you should speak with Audrey about economizing in other areas. The Broadway shows the dinners out the new clothes. I can't do that, he cut in. You don't understand the pressure I'm under to maintain a certain image. I understand that image is costing me my security and my health, I said with more firmness than I'd shown in years. There was a long silence. I didn't realize it was that bad, he finally said. Why didn't you tell me? Would it have made a difference? I asked. Another pause. I don't know, he admitted, and the honesty of it was almost worse than a lie would have been. I'll continue until October, I said finally. That's 3 more months. After that, Owen, you need to find another solution. Okay, he agreed quickly, relief evident in his voice. That's fair, and by then I'm sure the Stanfield position will have come through. We said goodbye, and I sat staring at the phone for a long time afterward. Despite his assurances, I had the sinking feeling that October would come and go with the same excuses, the same promises of future improvements, the same expectation that I would continue to sacrifice. And the worst part was I wasn't sure I had the strength to refuse him. As summer turned to early fall, I saw Owen only twice. Both visits were brief and strained. He seemed distracted, constantly checking his phone, making excuses to leave early. Audrey never accompanied him, always busy with work events, family obligations, or social engagements. During his second visit, I noticed a new watch on his wrist, a brand I recognized from luxury magazine advertisements. "That's new," I commented, nodding toward it. "Oh, this." He touched it self-consciously. "It was a gift from Audrey for our anniversary. It looks expensive." "It's just a mid-range model," he said dismissively, though I knew even a mid-range luxury watch would cost thousands. I thought about my leaking roof, my untreated knee pain, the dental work I continued to postpone. Something inside me hardened. "Owen," I said, setting down my coffee cup with deliberate care, "I can't continue helping with your rent after October. I mean it this time." His expression darkened. "Mom, we've talked about this. The Stanfield position has been just around the corner for over a year now," I finished for him. "I can't base my financial decisions on possibilities anymore. I need certainty." "Nothing in life is certain," he argued, "but I'm working on it, I swear. And in the meantime, I'm depleting my savings, ignoring my health problems, and watching my house fall into disrepair." He looked around as if seeing my home for the first time in years, noting the water stain on the ceiling from the roof, leak the frayed edges of the carpet, the ancient television in the corner. "I had no idea things were this bad," he said softly. "Because you haven't been paying attention," I replied. "You've been too caught up in Audrey's world to notice mine." He flinched as if I'd slapped him. "That's not fair." "Isn't it? When was the last time you asked about my health, my friends, my life? It's been all about you and your needs for 2 years now, Owen." He stood up abruptly. "I think I should go." "That's your solution, to walk away rather than face the truth." "The truth is that I'm doing everything I can to build a better life," he said, anger creeping into his voice. "And instead of supporting me, you're making me feel guilty for it." "I've supported you to the tune of $30,000, I reminded him. "I think I've earned the right to speak honestly." "Fine, I'll figure something out." He grabbed his jacket. "I'll see you next Sunday." But he didn't come the following Sunday, or the Sunday after that. October came and went, and with it my final payment to Owen's account. When I didn't transfer the money on November 1st, my phone rang within hours. "Mom, did you forget the transfer?" Owen's voice was tight. "No, Owen, I told you October would be the last month." "But the Stanfield position is still processing. The HR department is just slow." "I'm sorry, but my decision is final." There was a long silence. "I don't know how we're going to make rent this month." The "we" struck me as particularly ironic, given that Audrey had no idea I had been subsidizing their lifestyle for 2 years. "Perhaps it's time for an honest conversation with your wife," I suggested. "You don't understand what you're asking," he said desperately. "It would destroy her image of me. And that matters more than the truth, more than treating your mother with respect and consideration. You're making this about you when it's about our future, mine and Audrey's." "No, Owen, I'm making this about reality versus illusion. You've been living in an illusion for 2 years, and I've been funding it. That stops now." He hung up without another word. For the first time in 2 years, I had stood my ground. But as I sat alone in my quiet house, victory felt hollow. I had lost something precious, the unconditional trust between a mother and her child, and I wasn't sure I would ever get it back. The weeks following my stand against Owen brought an unfamiliar silence to my life. No phone calls, no texts, no Sunday visits. November turned cold early that year, with frost etching delicate patterns on my windows each morning. My wisteria had shed its leaves, its bare vines twisting around the backyard trellis like abandoned promises. I'd like to say I used my reclaimed $1.200 a month wisely, that I immediately scheduled the physical therapy my knees desperately needed, or called a roofer about the worsening leak in the ceiling. But the truth was, I found myself paralyzed by a strange mixture of liberation and grief. The money remained in my account untouched, as if spending it would somehow make Owen's absence more permanent. It was Evelyn who finally pushed me to action one blustery afternoon in late November. "This has gone on long enough," she announced, appearing at my door unannounced with a grocery bag in one hand and her car keys in the other. "Put on something warm. We're going to the doctor." "Evelyn, I don't have an appointment." "I made one for you," she said, brooking no argument. "Dr. Patel had a cancellation. Now grab your purse and let's go." I knew better than to argue with Evelyn when she used that tone, the same one she'd employed with generations of 8th graders during her teaching career. 20 minutes later, I was sitting in Dr. Patel's waiting room, filling out forms I'd been avoiding for months. Dr. Patel's expression grew increasingly concerned as she examined my knees, testing my range of motion and noting my winces of pain. "Hazel, why have you waited so long to come in? The arthritis has progressed significantly since your last visit." I looked away, embarrassed. "Financial concerns," I said simply. She nodded, having heard this explanation from many aging patients on fixed incomes. "I'm going to be direct with you. Without intervention, you're looking at possible mobility issues within the year. The inflammation is severe, and there's significant cartilage degradation." "What kind of intervention?" "A series of treatments, physical therapy twice weekly for at least 3 months, possibly corticosteroid injections and prescription anti-inflammatories. We should also discuss the possibility of knee replacement if conservative treatments don't provide relief." I nodded, trying to process the information while mentally calculating costs. "Your insurance will cover part of it," Dr. Patel continued, seemingly reading my mind. "But there will be out-of-pocket expenses. Physical therapy alone will be about $75 per session after insurance. 8 sessions a month. $600, half of what I'd been sending Owen." "I understand," I said quietly. "This isn't optional, Hazel," Dr. Patel added, her voice gentle but firm. "This is about maintaining your quality of life, your independence." As Evelyn drove me home, prescription in hand, she glanced at me sidelong. "What did the doctor say?" I explained Dr. Patel's recommendations and the associated costs. "So you'll start next week," Evelyn said as if it were already decided. "I don't know, Ev. It's a lot of money." She pulled the car over abruptly, turning to face me with uncharacteristic intensity. "Hazel Thompson, you spent 2 years destroying your financial security for your son's lifestyle. Are you telling me you won't spend a fraction of that on your own health?" Put that way, it did seem absurd. "You're right," I conceded. "I'll call tomorrow to schedule the appointments." "Good." She pulled back onto the road. "And the roof repair." "One thing at a time," I said, though I knew she was right about that too. That evening, as I prepared a simple dinner of soup and toast, my phone rang. I felt a surge of hope, thinking it might be Owen finally breaking his silence. But the caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. "Hello, Mrs. Thompson. This is Claire Bennett, Audrey's sister." I nearly dropped the phone in surprise. "Claire, is everything all right? Is Owen okay?" "Everyone's fine," she assured me. "I was hoping we could meet for coffee. There's something I think you should know." My mind raced with possibilities, none of them good. "Of course. Tomorrow, there's a cafe called Regents on 38th Avenue. Does 2 Heuser work for you?" I agreed, too curious and concerned to refuse. The next day, I arrived at the cafe early, choosing a quiet table in the corner. I hadn't seen Claire since the wedding, and I wondered what could possibly motivate Audrey's sister to reach out to me now. She arrived precisely at 2:30, dressed in a simple wool coat and jeans noticeably less ostentatious than her sister's usual attire. She spotted me and waved, stopping at the counter to order before joining me. "Mrs. Thompson, thank you for meeting me," she said, removing her gloves and unwinding a scarf from her neck. "Please call me Hazel. And I should be thanking you. It's not every day I get a call from my daughter-in-law's family." She smiled ruefully. "I imagine not, especially given how things have been." "And how have things been?" I asked carefully. "I haven't spoken to Owen in nearly a month." Claire's coffee arrived, and she took a moment to add cream and sugar, seemingly gathering her thoughts. "I'm not sure how to begin this conversation," she admitted finally. "I've debated whether I should involve myself at all." "Is Owen in some kind of trouble?" "Not exactly. It's more, I think you deserve to know certain things, about Owen and Audrey and about the financial situation." My heart began to race. "What about it?" Claire leaned forward, lowering her voice slightly. "A few days ago, Audrey called me upset. She said Owen had been distracted and irritable lately, that he'd snapped at her about their spending. When she pressed him, he admitted he was worried about money, that they might not make rent this month." "I see," I said, keeping my expression neutral. "The thing is, Mrs. Thompson, Hazel, she was shocked. Said it was the first time he'd ever mentioned any financial concerns." Claire paused, watching me closely. "But that can't be true, can it? Not if you've been helping them with rent." I felt suddenly lightheaded. "How do you know about that?" Audrey told me. Not now, but 2 years ago. We were having dinner, just the two of us, and she mentioned casually that Owen's mother was chipping in for their apartment. Said it was the least you could do given how often Owen visits you and helps with your house. The room seemed to tilt slightly. 2 years ago. Audrey had known about my financial help for 2 years. Known and not only kept silent about it, but apparently twisted it into some kind of obligation I owed them. She knew, I whispered more to myself than to Claire. All this time she knew. Claire nodded, looking genuinely remorseful. I'm sorry. I assumed you were aware that she knew. It wasn't until recently, when I heard her reaction to Owen's financial concerns, that I realized something wasn't adding up. Owen made me promise not to tell her, I explained, still processing this revelation. He said she would think less of him, that it would hurt her pride to know he needed help. That sounds like Audrey's influence, Claire said grimly. She's always been obsessed with appearances, with what people think. Growing up, she was the daughter who would rather go into debt for designer clothes than admit our family couldn't afford them. I thought about all the Sunday visits Owen had canceled, all the times I'd been excluded from their lives, all while Audrey knew I was sacrificing to support their lifestyle. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Claire sighed. Because it isn't right what they've done to you. Audrey's my sister and I love her, but I've watched her transform Owen from the genuine down-to-earth man he seemed to be when they met into someone obsessed with status and image. And now that you've stopped helping financially— How do you know I stopped? I interrupted. Audrey mentioned that Owen is suddenly panicking about money, that they might need to downsize if things don't improve. She offered a small, sad smile. I put 2 and 2 together. I sat back, trying to absorb everything Claire was telling me. Not only had Owen lied to me about Audrey not knowing, but Audrey had known for years and had never acknowledged my help, never shown gratitude, never treated me with the respect my contribution to their life deserved. There's more, Claire added hesitantly. Something else you should probably know. What is it? The apartment. It's not $3,500 a month. It's $2,500. I know because my friend Julia lived in the same building until last year. The final piece of the deception fell into place. Owen had inflated the rent by $1,000 a month, almost the exact amount I had been contributing, which meant he'd been pocketing the difference or using it for other expenses. Thank you for telling me this, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. It couldn't have been easy coming here like this. Claire shrugged. I've never approved of how Audrey treats people, or how our family treated you at the wedding and after. You deserved better. As we parted outside the cafe, Claire hesitated. What will you do now? I'm not sure yet, I replied honestly. But whatever it is, it will be with full knowledge of the truth. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat in my living room until dawn, surrounded by bank statements and medical bills, thinking about the years of deception and the choices that had led me here. By morning, a plan had begun to take shape, not one born of revenge, but of necessary truth. A week after my meeting with Claire, Owen finally called. His tone was conciliatory, almost sheepish. Mom, I was hoping we could talk. I'm listening, I replied, neither warm nor cold. I've been thinking about what you said, about being honest with Audrey. He paused. You were right. We need to make some changes. I've started looking at more affordable apartments. That seems sensible. The thing is, we're locked into our lease until March, and breaking it would cost a fortune. Another pause. I was wondering if you might reconsider helping us just until then. After that, I promise we'll downsize. I closed my eyes, remembering Claire's revelations. Owen, what's the actual rent on your apartment? What, it's $3,500 like I told you. Are you sure about that? Because I have reason to believe it's actually $2,500. There was a long silence. Who told you that? He finally asked, his voice tight. Does it matter? Is it true? Another pause. The base rent is $2,500, yes, but with utilities and maintenance fees. Those are typically separate from rent, I interrupted. Why did you lie to me, Owen? I didn't lie, he protested. I rounded up to include all the expenses. By exactly the amount I was contributing, that seems like quite a coincidence. Mom, why are you doing this? I'm trying to be honest now to make changes. Why bring up the past? Because the past informs the present, I replied. Just like one lie usually connects to others. What's that supposed to mean? I took a deep breath. Does Audrey really not know I've been helping with rent? The silence that followed was so long I thought he might have hung up. Owen, are you there? Yes, he said finally, his voice barely audible. She knows. Despite Claire's warning, hearing the confirmation from Owen himself felt like a physical blow. How long has she known? Since the first year, he admitted. She found the bank statements, saw the transfers. And you didn't think to tell me to release me from a promise that was already broken. I was embarrassed, he said miserably. And then it became easier to just let it continue. Easier for whom? Not for me, cutting back on necessities, putting off medical care, watching my house deteriorate. Not for me being excluded from your lives while simultaneously funding your lifestyle. I'm sorry, Mom. I never meant for it to go this far. But it did go this far, Owen. And now we have to deal with the consequences. What does that mean? It means no, I won't be resuming payments, not until March, not ever. It means you need to have an honest conversation with Audrey about living within your means. And it means you and I have a lot of repair work to do on our relationship work that starts with complete honesty from this point forward. And if I can't afford the apartment until March, if we get evicted, then you move in with Audrey's parents in their Greenwich mansion. I said, surprising myself with my firmness. Or you find a month-to-month rental, or you do what millions of other adults do when faced with financial challenges, you adapt. After we hung up, I felt a curious mixture of sorrow and strength. Sorrow for the relationship that had been damaged perhaps irreparably by years of deception. And strength from finally speaking my truth, from refusing to be manipulated any longer. That afternoon, I called the physical therapist and scheduled my first appointment. Then I called a roofer about repairing the leak. Small steps toward reclaiming my life and my dignity. The weeks before Christmas passed in a blur of physical therapy appointments, doctor visits, and home repairs. I used the money I was no longer sending to Owen to address the problems I'd been ignoring for too long. The roof was fixed just before the first snow. I had my dental work done, wincing at the cost, but relieved to be free of the persistent toothache. I even replaced my ancient washing machine, saving myself the weekly trips to the laundromat. Owen called occasionally, our conversations stilted and superficial. He never mentioned money again, nor did he invite me to their apartment or include me in any holiday plans. I spent Christmas Eve with Evelyn and her family, grateful for their kindness, but acutely aware of my son's absence. On New Year's Day, as I was taking down my modest decorations, my doorbell rang. To my astonishment, Owen stood on my porch, a small gift bag in hand. "Happy New Year, Mom," he said tentatively. "Owen." I stepped back, allowing him to enter. "This is a surprise." He looked different, somehow slightly thinner, less polished. His designer coat had been replaced by a more practical parka, and his haircut was less meticulous than usual. "I brought you something," he said, holding out the bag. "It's not much, but—" Inside was a beautiful blue scarf, soft and clearly handmade. "It's lovely," I said, genuinely touched. "Melissa at work knits them. I remembered you saying blue was your favorite color." I wrapped it around my neck, appreciating its warmth. "Thank you. Would you like some coffee?" He nodded, following me to the kitchen. As I prepared the coffee, I noticed him looking around, taking in the new appliance, the repaired ceiling, the absence of my cane. "You've made some changes," he observed. "Yes, long overdue repairs and medical treatments." "Your knee is better. I noticed you're not using the cane." I nodded. "Physical therapy has helped tremendously. I still have pain, but it's manageable now." We sat at the kitchen table, the silence between us heavy with unspoken words. Finally, Owen spoke. "I've been doing a lot of thinking, Mom, about everything that happened." He stared into his coffee cup. "I was wrong. Not just about the money, but about how I treated you, how I allowed Audrey to treat you." I waited, letting him continue. "We've downsized," he said. "Broke the lease, paid the penalty. We're in a smaller place in Sunnyside now. Not fancy, but affordable on my salary alone. How did Audrey take that?" A shadow crossed his face. "Not well initially. There were a lot of arguments, tears, accusations." "I'm sorry," I said and meant it. Whatever my feelings about Audrey, I never wanted my son's marriage to suffer. "Don't be. It was overdue. We've been living in a fantasy world pretending to be something we're not. It wasn't sustainable with or without your help. And now," he shrugged, "we're adjusting. Audrey's taken on more hours at work. We've cut back on restaurants shopping. Her parents aren't thrilled about the move, but they'll get over it." I sipped my coffee, absorbing this information. "And the Stanfield position, did that ever materialize?" Owen's smile was rueful. It was never as solid as I led you to believe. William made some introductions, but nothing came of them. I think he was less impressed with me once we moved to a less prestigious address. That says more about him than it does about you. Maybe. He hesitated. I've actually been interviewing with a smaller firm. The salary would be similar to what I make now, but there's more growth potential, and it's closer to our new apartment. That sounds promising? It is. He took a deep breath. Mom, I know I can never fully repay you for everything you've given me, not just the money, but the years of sacrifice. But I want to start making amends. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a check, sliding it across the table. I glanced down at it. $5,000. It's not much compared to what I owe you, he said quickly, but it's a start. I've set up a monthly transfer to your account, $500 a month until everything is repaid. I was speechless, my eyes filling with tears. Not because of the money, welcome though it was, but because this gesture represented something far more valuable: accountability, recognition, respect. Thank you, I said simply. Owen nodded, blinking back his own tears. I lost my way, Mom. Somewhere between meeting Audrey and trying to fit into her world, I forgot who I was, who you raised me to be. And who is that? I asked softly. A man who tells the truth, who lives within his means, who treats his mother with honor and gratitude. He looked down, ashamed. I became someone else, someone obsessed with appearances, with status, someone who used others, even his own mother, to maintain a lifestyle he couldn't afford. What changed? You did, he said, meeting my eyes. When you finally stood your ground, when you forced me to face reality, it was like waking up from a dream that had turned into a nightmare without me realizing it. We talked for hours that day, more honestly than we had in years. Owen told me about the pressure he'd felt to keep up with Audrey's world, the constant fear of being exposed as not enough. I shared my hurt at being excluded, at being treated as a financial resource rather than a mother, a person with needs and feelings of her own. As he was leaving, Owen paused at the door. I'd like you to come to dinner next week, at our new place. Nothing fancy, just a simple meal, but I'd like you to see where we live now. I agreed, cautiously optimistic about this new beginning, but as I watched him drive away, a nagging doubt remained. Owen seemed genuinely remorseful, committed to change. But Audrey, her absence from today's visit spoke volumes. I wondered if she was truly on board with their new, more modest lifestyle, or merely biding her time waiting for a return to the status and luxury she clearly valued. The following week, I drove to Owen and Audrey's new apartment in Sunnyside. It was in a well-maintained but unremarkable building, a far cry from their doorman address on the Upper West Side. Owen greeted me with a warm hug and ushered me inside. The apartment was smaller but pleasant, with simple, comfortable furniture. Most of the sleek designer pieces from their previous home were gone, replaced by more practical items. Family photos adorned the walls, including several of Owen and me that had been conspicuously absent from their former apartment. Audrey's running late, Owen explained. Work meeting. She should be here soon. I nodded, trying not to read too much into her absence. Owen gave me a tour of the apartment, pointing out the small balcony where he'd placed a container garden, the second bedroom he was using as a home office. It's lovely, I said sincerely. It feels like a home. That's what I told Audrey. Our old place looked like a furniture showroom, beautiful but impersonal. This feels like somewhere we can actually live. As Owen finished preparing dinner, I wandered around the living room examining the photos. Among them was one from their wedding day, Owen and Audrey flanked by her parents, all smiles and designer clothing. The contrast with Owen's current appearance was striking. The sound of a key in the lock announced Audrey's arrival. She entered carrying a designer handbag that probably cost more than all my recent medical treatments combined. Mrs. Thompson, she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. How nice to see you. Hello, Audrey. Thank you for having me over. She hung her coat in the closet, revealing an outfit that, while less ostentatious than her usual attire, still screamed expensive. I apologize for being late. Client emergency. Throughout dinner, Audrey was polite but distant, contributing little to the conversation beyond perfunctory responses. She picked at her food, taking frequent sips of wine, her gaze occasionally drifting toward the window as if longing for escape. When Owen mentioned his interview with the smaller firm, Audrey's smile tightened. It's a stepping stone, she said, a forced brightness in her voice, until something more suitable comes along. The tension in the room was palpable. This was not a woman who had accepted their changed circumstances. This was a woman enduring what she viewed as a temporary setback. After dinner, as Owen cleared the dishes, Audrey's phone chimed. She glanced at it, then stood abruptly. "I'm so sorry, but I need to take this call. Work again." She disappeared into the bedroom, closing the door firmly behind her. Owen returned from the kitchen, his expression apologetic. "She's still adjusting," he said quietly. "The transition hasn't been easy for her." "I can see that." He sighed, sitting down heavily across from me. "She's trying, Mom. In her own way. This isn't the life she imagined for herself." "Is it the life you imagined?" I asked gently. He considered this. "No," he admitted, "but it's an honest one. And that counts for something, doesn't it?" I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "It counts for everything." As I drove home that evening, I reflected on the dinner, on the clear disconnect between Owen and Audrey's visions for their future. My son seemed genuinely committed to living authentically, to rebuilding his life on a foundation of truth rather than appearances. But Audrey, her every gesture, her every word conveyed that she viewed their current situation as temporary, a regrettable detour on the road back to luxury and status. I worried about what that meant for their marriage, for Owen's newfound commitment to honesty and financial responsibility. Could their relationship survive such fundamentally different values, or would Audrey eventually pull Owen back into a world of pretense and financial strain? These questions lingered in my mind over the following months. Owen continued to visit regularly, sometimes alone, occasionally with Audrey, though she always seemed to have a reason to leave early. He secured the position at the smaller firm and seemed genuinely excited about the work, the colleagues, the opportunities for growth. He never missed a monthly payment to me, even adding extra when he received a performance bonus. Audrey, meanwhile, became increasingly distant. She worked longer hours, spent weekends with her family in Greenwich, made frequent references to friends who were living in better neighborhoods or taking exotic vacations. The gulf between them seemed to widen with each passing week. In early March, Owen called to invite me to dinner, not at their apartment, but at an upscale restaurant in Manhattan. "It's a celebration," he explained. "My 6-month work anniversary and," he hesitated, "my birthday." I'd been so caught up in my own health issues and the drama of our financial situation that I'd nearly forgotten his birthday was approaching. The realization filled me with shame. "Of course I'll come," I said. "I'm sorry, Owen. With everything that happened, I almost forgot your birthday was coming up." "It's okay, Mom. I understand. Besides, after how I treated you these past few years, I'm hardly in a position to expect birthday remembrances." "That's not true. You'll always be my son, and I'll always celebrate the day you came into this world." "Thanks, Mom." His voice warmed. "The dinner is actually Audrey's idea. She's invited her parents and sisters, too. I think she's trying to make an effort to bring the families together." I appreciated the gesture, though I couldn't help feeling apprehensive about spending an evening with the Bennetts, who had always made it clear they found me lacking. "That's very thoughtful of her," I said, pushing aside my reservations. "What time should I be there?" The restaurant Audrey had chosen was one of those Manhattan establishments where the lighting is deliberately dim to conceal the astronomical prices. The maitre d' led me to a private dining room in the back, where Owen, Audrey, and her family were already seated. Owen rose immediately to greet me with a hug. "Mom, you look wonderful." I had made an effort, wearing a new dress purchased specifically for the occasion and having my hair professionally styled. The physical therapy had improved my mobility significantly, allowing me to walk without a cane. "Happy birthday, darling," I said, pressing a small wrapped package into his hands. Inside was a vintage watch that had belonged to his father, restored and polished to a soft gleam. Audrey air-kissed my cheeks, her smile firmly in place. "Mrs. Thompson, so glad you could join us." William and Catherine Bennett acknowledged me with cool politeness, while Claire offered a genuine smile and warm greeting. Another woman I recognized as Audrey's older sister Diane barely glanced up from her phone. As I took my seat, I noticed the table was set with fine china and crystal multiple wine glasses at each place setting. A bottle of champagne already sat in an ice bucket. "We're celebrating," Audrey announced, gesturing to a waiter to pour the champagne. "Not just Owen's birthday, but some exciting news." Owen looked slightly uncomfortable, shifting in his chair. "Audrey, maybe we should wait." "Nonsense," Catherine interjected. "This is wonderful news. We're all family here." I glanced at Owen, who wouldn't meet my eyes. A sense of foreboding settled over me. Owen has been offered a position at Harrington and Wells, Audrey proclaimed proudly. Senior engineering consultant. He starts next month. Harrington and Wells, I repeated. I thought you were happy at your new firm. I am, Owen said quickly. I was, but this is an incredible opportunity. The salary is nearly double and the prestige. William made a few calls, Catherine added, smiling beneficently. Once they understood Owen's qualifications, they were quite eager to meet him. We'll be able to move back to a proper neighborhood, Audrey said, unable to contain her excitement. I've already started looking at apartments on the Upper East Side. I watched Owen's face carefully, noting the mixture of pride and discomfort in his expression. This was not a man celebrating an achievement he had earned through his own merit. This was a man being handed a position through family connections, being reeled back into a world of appearances and status. Congratulations, I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. That sounds like a significant change. It's the opportunity I've been waiting for, Owen replied, though there was something rehearsed about his words. The chance to really advance my career. As dinner progressed, it became increasingly clear that this celebration was less about Owen's birthday and more about his return to the Bennett family fold. William spoke at length about the connections Owen would make at Harrington and Wells, the doors that would open. Catherine and Diane discussed potential apartments, private clubs. Owen might now qualify for vacation destinations suddenly within reach. Through it all, Audrey beamed, occasionally squeezing Owen's hand or touching his arm possessively. This was her victory lap, proof that their downsizing had been merely a temporary setback on their path to the life she believed they deserved. Owen contributed little to these discussions, smiling and nodding at appropriate intervals, but offering few comments of his own. When he did speak, it was to ask about my health, my house repairs, topics that clearly bored his in-laws. By the time dessert arrived, an elaborate cake with congratulations written in chocolate script, I felt a profound sadness settling over me. All the progress Owen had made, all the hard-won insights about living authentically, were being swept away by the allure of status and money. As coffee was served, William raised his glass in a toast. To Owen, soon to be one of the rising stars at Harrington and Wells. We always knew you had it in you, son. Everyone clinked glasses. Then Audrey added, and to finally leaving that dreadful Sunnyside apartment behind. Laughter rippled around the table, everyone except Owen, Claire, and me. I thought you were happy in Sunnyside, I said quietly to Owen. You seemed proud of the home you'd created there. Before he could answer, Audrey interjected. It was fine as a temporary measure, Mrs. Thompson, but it was never going to be permanent. Not for someone of Owen's capabilities. And what capabilities are those? I asked, unable to keep the edge from my voice. The ability to let his father-in-law secure him positions he hasn't earned. The willingness to live beyond his means to maintain appearances. A shocked silence fell over the table. Owen looked stricken. Mom, please. No, I want to know. I turned to William. What exactly made you decide Owen was suddenly qualified for this position, when just a few months ago you couldn't be bothered to help him find appropriate work? William's face reddened. I don't think this is an appropriate discussion for a celebration. This isn't a celebration, I interrupted. This is a coronation. You're welcoming Owen back into the fold now that he's agreed to play by your rules again. Mrs. Thompson, Catherine said icily, I don't think you understand. I understand perfectly, I replied. I understand that my son spent 2 years deceiving me about his finances, taking money from my fixed income to maintain a lifestyle he couldn't afford, all to impress your family. I understand that your daughter knew about this deception for years and said nothing, treating me with contempt while benefiting from my sacrifice. Diane gasped. Audrey's face drained of color. Owen looked as though he might be sick. What is she talking about? William demanded, turning to Owen. What money? Owen swallowed hard. Mom helped with our rent for a while, when we were in the Upper West Side apartment. Helped, you mean she contributed something? Catherine asked, clearly confused. Won $200 a month for 2 years, I stated flatly. Nearly $30,000 total. Money that came from my teacher's pension, from my savings from funds meant for my medical care and home repairs. Owen told me it was just a small amount, Audrey said quickly. A few $100s here and there. You knew. William's voice rose in disbelief. You knew they were taking money from her. Not taking, Audrey protested. Borrowing, temporarily. I laughed without humor. Is that what you told yourself? That it was temporary? That it was a small amount? Did you ever once thank me? Acknowledge the sacrifice. Include me in your life in any meaningful way. No one spoke. The truth hung in the air between us, undeniable now that it had been spoken aloud. I think, Claire said into the silence, that we all owe Mrs. Thompson an apology. For what? Diane demanded. It's not our fault if Owen couldn't support himself properly. Diane! Catherine snapped. That's enough. Owen stood abruptly. I need some air, he muttered, and left the private dining room without looking at any of us. Audrey moved to follow him, but William stopped her with a hand on her arm. Not you. You stay right here and explain what's been going on. I rose from my chair, suddenly exhausted by all of it, the pretense, the judgments, the manufactured prestige. Excuse me, I said quietly. I should check on my son. I found Owen outside the restaurant, leaning against the brick wall, his breath making small clouds in the cold March air. I'm sorry, I said, joining him. I shouldn't have said those things. Not tonight, not like that. He shook his head. No, Mom. You were right to say them. They needed to be said. He looked at me, his eyes reflecting the streetlights. I was slipping back into old patterns, wasn't I, letting myself be bought? It's not for me to judge, I replied. If this job is truly what you want— It isn't, he interrupted. At least not like this. Not as some favor from William, not as a way to get Audrey back into the lifestyle she misses. He sighed deeply. I was actually happy at the smaller firm, doing work I believed in, living within our means. Then why accept the offer? Because it's easier than fighting. Easier than watching Audrey's disappointment every day. Easier than being the odd one out in her family. He ran a hand through his hair. But it's not right, is it? It's just another form of deception, pretending to be something I'm not, living a life I haven't earned. I placed a hand on his arm. Only you can decide what's right for your life, Owen. But I hope whatever you choose, it allows you to look in the mirror each morning and respect the man you see there. He covered my hand with his own. When did you get so wise, Mom? Around the time I stopped letting my son take advantage of me, I replied with a small smile. Turns out standing up for yourself clears the mind wonderfully. We stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching taxis speed by pedestrians huddled against the late winter chill. I should go back inside, Owen finally said. Face the music. Do you want me to come with you? He shook his head. No, this is something I need to handle myself. He hugged me tightly. Thank you, Mom. For everything. For the truth, even when it hurts. I watched him walk back into the restaurant, shoulders squared, head high. Whatever happened next with Audrey, with the job offer, with his marriage, I knew he was finally facing it with honesty. And that, more than any amount of money or status, was what I had always wanted for my son. 3 months passed after that disastrous birthday dinner. Owen called regularly, keeping me updated on the aftermath. He had declined the position at Harrington and Wells, choosing instead to remain at the smaller firm where he had earned his place through merit rather than connections. This decision had not gone over well with Audrey or her family. We're in counseling, he told me during one of our Sunday coffees, now reinstated as a weekly tradition. Trying to find common ground. It's hard. We want such different things. Do you still love her? I asked gently. He considered this. I love who I thought she was, or maybe who I wanted her to be. He sighed. That's not very fair to either of us, is it? By June, it was clear the counseling wasn't working. Audrey had moved back to her parents' home in Greenwich, ostensibly to think. Owen remained in the Sunnyside apartment, seemingly more relieved than devastated by her absence. She says I've changed, he told me, that I'm not the man she married. Have you changed? No, he replied after a moment's reflection. I've returned to who I always was. It's just that she never really knew that person. In July, Audrey filed for separation. Owen seemed to accept this with a resigned calm that surprised me. It's for the best, he said. We were trying to force something that was never right to begin with. Throughout this tumultuous period, Owen continued to visit regularly, to make his monthly payments to me, to work on repairing our relationship with honesty and genuine effort. He helped me plant a vegetable garden in my backyard, install a new railing on my porch steps, replace the ancient windows that had allowed drafts to seep in during winter. We were rebuilding not just my house, but the trust between us. It was slow, sometimes painful work, but deeply rewarding. In September, Owen called with an unexpected invitation. Mom, it's my birthday next week. I'd like to have a small dinner at my place. Nothing fancy, just you, Evelyn, if she'd like to come, and a colleague from work, Melissa Rivera. She's been a good friend through all the divorce stuff. I'd love to come, I said, touched by the invitation. And I'm sure Evelyn would too. She's been asking about you. Great. Thursday at 7, I'm making lasagna Dad's recipe. The fact that he remembered his father's recipe, that he was choosing to honor Michael's memory in this way, brought tears to my eyes. That sounds perfect. The evening of the dinner, Evelyn and I arrived together, a bottle of wine and a homemade cake in hand. Owen's apartment had changed since my last visit, not in any dramatic way, but in small telling details. The few remaining designer pieces had been replaced by comfortable, unpretentious furniture. New artwork adorned the walls, local scenes, nature photographs, pieces that reflected Owen's actual tastes rather than what would impress others. You've redecorated, I observed. He nodded. After Audrey moved out, I realized almost nothing in the apartment actually reflected me, so I've been making changes a little at a time. It looks like you now, I said approvingly. Authentic. The doorbell rang, announcing the arrival of Melissa Rivera. She was about Owen's age, with warm brown eyes and a quick smile. She greeted me and Evelyn with genuine friendliness, complimenting my scarf, the blue one Owen had given me on New Year's Day. Owen told me you knitted it, I said. It's beautiful work. It's a hobby, she explained. I find it relaxing after a day of staring at spreadsheets. Melissa's an environmental engineer, Owen added, taking her coat. She specializes in water quality assessment. Throughout dinner, I watched their interaction with interest. There was an easy comfort between them, a natural flow to their conversation that had been conspicuously absent between Owen and Audrey. Melissa laughed easily and listened intently when others spoke. She asked thoughtful questions about my teaching career, about Evelyn's grandchildren, about Owen's childhood. As Owen served the cake I'd baked, Melissa raised her glass. A toast to the birthday boy. May this year bring you joy, fulfillment, and continued growth. We clinked glasses, and Owen smiled a genuine, relaxed smile I hadn't seen in years. Thank you all for being here, he said, for being part of my life during this transitional period. Transitions can be good, Melissa commented. They force us to reevaluate, to decide what really matters. And what matters to you? I asked her. Honesty, she replied without hesitation. Authenticity. Living in alignment with your values rather than external expectations. She glanced at Owen. Something I think Owen understands better than most. The look that passed between them spoke volumes. This was more than a friendship born of workplace proximity. This was a genuine connection, a meeting of like minds and values. As Evelyn and I prepared to leave, Owen pulled me aside. What did you think of Melissa? He asked, a hint of nervousness in his voice. I think she's lovely, I replied honestly. Smart, kind, genuine. She is, isn't she? He glanced toward the kitchen where Melissa was wrapping leftover cake. We've been spending a lot of time together, just as friends until the divorce is finalized, but maybe eventually. I think she brings out the best in you, I said. The real you. His smile was answer enough. As Evelyn drove us home, she chuckled. Well, that was illuminating. What do you mean? Oh, come on, Hazel. Those two are clearly smitten with each other. And what a refreshing change from Audrey, someone who actually values Owen for who he is, not what he can pretend to be. I nodded, feeling a cautious hope for my son's future. He seems happy, genuinely happy, because he's living authentically now, Evelyn observed. No more pretense, no more keeping up with the Joneses, or in his case, the Bennetts. 2 weeks later, Owen called with news. The divorce is moving forward, he said. Audrey's lawyer has drawn up the papers. It's all very civilized, no contested assets, just a clean break. How do you feel about that? I asked. Relieved, he admitted. And a little sad, of course. Nobody gets married expecting it to end, but mostly relieved. Like I can finally breathe freely. He paused. There's something else. I've been offered a position at an environmental engineering firm in Boston. It's a great opportunity working on water quality projects for communities in need. Boston, that's a significant move. It is, and I'm considering it seriously. Another pause. Melissa has been offered a position there too with the same firm. We'd be working on different projects, but you'd be moving together, I finished for him. Potentially, yes, if that doesn't seem too soon. Oh, and only you can determine what timing is right for your life. But I will say this, when something feels right, genuinely right, sometimes the conventional timelines don't apply. That's what Melissa said, he replied, a smile in his voice. But before I make any decisions, I wanted to talk to you about it. The move would mean we'd see each other less frequently. There are trains, I pointed out, and phones, and I've always wanted to explore Boston more thoroughly. So you'd be okay with it if I took the job? More than okay. I'd be proud. I meant it sincerely. The fact that he was consulting me, considering how his decisions would affect our relationship, was itself a sign of how far we'd come. Just promise you'll keep our Sunday calls even if they can't be in person every week. Absolutely, he agreed. And Mom, thank you. For everything. For forcing me to face the truth even when it was painful. For giving me the chance to make amends. That's what mothers do, I said. The good ones anyway. We tell the truth even when it hurts. Because in the end, the truth is all that matters. As I hung up, I looked out my window at the wisteria in the backyard, now heavy with late summer blooms. Like that vine, my relationship with Owen had experienced dormant periods, times when it seemed nothing was growing or changing. But beneath the surface, in ways not immediately visible, healing and renewal had been taking place. The doorbell rang, interrupting my reflections. When I opened it, I was startled to find Audrey standing on my porch. "Mrs. Thompson," she said, her voice lacking its usual confidence. "May I come in? There's something I need to say to you." "Please," she said again. "I know I have no right to ask, but I need 5 minutes of your time." Curiosity overcame my initial impulse to shut the door. "All right," I said, stepping aside. "Come in." Audrey entered hesitantly, glancing around my living room as if seeing it for the first time. Perhaps she was. In all the years she'd been married to Owen, she'd rarely set foot in my home, and when she had, she'd barely looked at anything beyond her own fingernails. "Would you like some tea?" I offered, more out of ingrained politeness than genuine hospitality. She shook her head. "No, thank you. I won't stay long." We sat across from each other in the living room, me in my comfortable armchair, her perched on the edge of the sofa as if prepared for quick flight. "I understand Owen's accepted a position in Boston," she said after an awkward silence. "He's considering it," I replied cautiously. "Nothing's been finalized." She nodded, twisting her hands in her lap. Gone was the enormous diamond engagement ring that had once dominated her left hand. "With Melissa Rivera. They've both been offered positions at the same firm, yes. They're good together," she said quietly. "I've seen them at the office. She laughs at his terrible jokes. Really laughs, not that polite titter I always gave him." I wasn't sure how to respond to this unexpected candor. "Audrey, why are you here?" She took a deep breath. "I'm here because my therapist says I need to make amends, to acknowledge the harm I've caused, and take responsibility for my actions." "Your therapist?" "I've been seeing Dr. Winters for 3 months now," she explained. Since the night of Owen's birthday dinner. The night everything had exploded. The night all the lies had been exposed." "I see. Mrs. Thompson Hazel, I owe you an apology. A sincere, unqualified apology." Her voice wavered slightly. "I knew you were helping us financially. I knew for years, and I never thanked you. I never acknowledged your sacrifice. I treated you with contempt while benefiting from your generosity." I remained silent, studying her face for signs of insincerity, but finding none. "At first," she continued, "I told myself it was Owen's responsibility to manage family finances, not mine. Then I convinced myself you owed it to us that a mother should help her son maintain the lifestyle he deserved." She laughed bitterly. "The lifestyle I thought we deserved. The lifestyle I'd been raised to believe was my birthright." "And now," I prompted, "now I understand it was wrong. All of it. The deception, the entitlement, the way we excluded you from our lives while taking your money." She met my eyes directly. "I'm deeply ashamed, and I'm sorry." Her words hung in the air between us, genuine but somehow inadequate against the backdrop of years of disrespect and manipulation. "Thank you for saying that," I said finally. "But I have to ask, why now? Why after all this time?" Audrey's shoulders slumped slightly. "Because I'm trying to rebuild my life on honesty rather than appearances. Because I can't move forward without acknowledging the mistakes I've made." She hesitated. "And because you deserve to hear it, whether it changes anything or not." I considered this. What happened after that night, after the dinner? Everything fell apart, she said simply. My parents were furious, not just with Owen, but with me. My father called me complicit in deception. My mother said I'd embarrassed the family. A flash of the old bitterness crossed her face. Suddenly, the daughter they'd always spoiled was a disappointment. That must have been difficult, I said, surprised to find I meant it. It forced me to look at myself, really look for perhaps the first time in my life. Her voice grew quieter. I didn't like what I saw. A woman so obsessed with status that she'd sacrifice honesty, ethics, even basic kindness to maintain appearances. And that's when you started therapy. She nodded. Claire suggested it. She's always been the sensible one in our family. A small smile touched her lips. She told me I needed to get my head out of my ass and face reality. Despite everything, I found myself smiling too. Claire seems like a straight shooter. She is. She also told me I'd been horrible to you and that I needed to make it right if I ever wanted to respect myself again. I considered Audrey's words, her demeanor, the apparent sincerity of her apology. Part of me wanted to accept it immediately, to offer forgiveness and move forward. But another part, the part that had spent years feeling invisible and used, hesitated. What do you want from me, Audrey? I asked directly. Forgiveness, absolution. I don't expect either, she replied, surprising me again. I just wanted you to hear the words, to know that I recognize the harm I caused and am truly sorry for it. She stood smoothing her jeans with a gesture that reminded me of the old Audrey, always concerned with appearances. That's all I came to say. I won't take up any more of your time. As she moved toward the door, I found myself speaking. Owen seems happy, happier than I've seen him in years. She paused, her hand on the doorknob. I know. That's how I know our marriage ending was the right decision, painful as it is. He was never truly himself with me. He was always trying to be someone else, someone he thought I wanted. And who was that? Someone like my father, she said softly. Wealthy, prestigious, powerful, someone who would impress my family and friends. She shook her head. But that was never Owen. The real Owen is kind and honest and content with simple things. I just couldn't see the value in that. Not then. And now I'm learning to value authenticity over appearances. It's not easy after a lifetime of the opposite, but I'm trying. As she opened the door, I made a decision. Audrey, she turned back. Thank you for coming today, for saying what needed to be said. She nodded, her eyes unexpectedly bright with unshed tears. Goodbye, Mrs. Thompson. I truly wish you well. After she left, I sat in my living room for a long time thinking about forgiveness, about growth, about the unexpected ways life can surprise you when you've resigned yourself to predictable disappointment. I didn't know if Audrey's change was temporary or permanent, genuine, or another performance. But I chose to believe she was trying just as Owen was trying, just as I was trying to create a life built on truth rather than illusion. The next day, I called Owen to tell him about Audrey's visit. She came to apologize, he asked, clearly surprised. That doesn't sound like Audrey. People can change, I said, if they want to badly enough. I suppose. He sounded skeptical. Did you believe her? I considered the question carefully. Yes, I think I did. She seemed different, more self-aware. That's good, I guess. For her sake, if nothing else. He paused. Does this change how you feel about everything that happened? It doesn't erase the past, I replied honestly. But it does make me more hopeful about the future, for all of us. A week later, I received a letter from Audrey. Inside was a check for $15,000 and a brief note, Mrs. Thompson. This is half of what Owen told me we took from you over the years. I wish it could be the full amount, but it's all I can manage at present. I've taken a new position at a smaller PR firm with a significantly lower salary, part of my attempt to live more authentically and within my means. I know money cannot repair the breach of trust, but I hope it might help with your home repairs or medical expenses. Please accept it with my deepest regrets for the past and best wishes for your future. Sincerely, Audrey Bennett. I deposited the check feeling not triumph but a quiet sense of justice. Not because of the money itself, welcome though it was, but because of what it represented: acknowledgement, responsibility, restitution. The beginning of healing for all of us. It's important to do this right, he told me during one of our Sunday calls. To build something based on mutual respect and honesty from the very beginning. That sounds wise, I agreed, feeling a surge of pride at his thoughtfulness, his determination to learn from past mistakes rather than repeat them. We've found apartments in the same neighborhood, he continued, close enough to share occasional meals, but with our own spaces. Melissa says it's important that we each establish ourselves independently in Boston before considering anything more. I like her more with every conversation, I commented, smiling. You'll have plenty of opportunity to get to know her better, he assured me. She's already talking about train schedules for visits to New York, and I've promised to bring her for Thanksgiving if that's okay with you. More than okay. Evelyn's coming too, and her daughter's family. It'll be a full house, but that's what holidays should be. Speaking of full houses, Owen said, his tone turning serious. I've been thinking about your place. That roof repair was just a temporary fix. The whole thing needs to be replaced before winter. I know, I sighed. I've gotten estimates, but it's expensive. I'm saving up. Let me take care of it, he offered. Between my repayment plan and Audrey's check, I think we owe you a roof at minimum. I hesitated. After 2 years of financial entanglement, I was wary of creating new dependencies, even well-intentioned ones. It's not a gift, Mom, Owen added, sensing my reluctance. It's repayment of a debt I should have addressed long before now. Let me think about it, I said. After we hung up, I walked through my house, noticing all the small signs of aging that I'd been ignoring: the worn carpeting, the outdated kitchen appliances, the windows that never quite sealed properly against winter drafts. The house was still structurally sound, still my beloved home, but it needed attention. Attention I could now afford to give it with the combination of Owen and Audrey's repayments, my reclaimed monthly budget, and my modest savings. I called Owen back the next day. About the roof, I began. I've been thinking, what if instead of you paying for it directly, we worked on it together? You could help me find a reputable contractor, review the estimates, maybe even assist with some of the work if that's possible. I'd like that, he said, sounding pleased. It would be good to work on a project together. And I'll pay for the materials with the money you and Audrey have returned, I continued. That way it's still a form of restitution, but it's also a collaborative effort rather than just a financial transaction. That makes sense, Owen agreed. Partners rather than debtor and creditor. Exactly. Over the next few weeks, Owen dedicated his weekends to helping me prepare for the roof replacement. We cleared the attic of decades of accumulated possessions, protecting what would remain with tarps, researching and interviewing contractors, comparing materials and costs. During those weekends, our conversations flowed more naturally than they had in years. We talked about his new job prospects, about Melissa, about my retirement activities, about memories of his father. We remembered who we had been to each other before money and status had clouded our relationship, mother and son, yes, but also friends, confidants, partners in navigating life's challenges. On his last weekend before the move to Boston, we sat under the wisteria, now bare of flowers, in the late October chill. The roof replacement was scheduled for the following week, all arrangements in place. I'm going to miss this, Owen said, gesturing to the vine-covered trellis. Our Sunday coffees. We'll have them when you visit, I assured him. And in the meantime, there's the phone. It's not the same. No, I agreed. But it's what we have. And compared to the silence of the past few years, it's more than enough. He nodded, sipping his coffee thoughtfully. I've been thinking about Dad a lot lately, wondering what he would make of everything that's happened. He would have been disappointed by the deception, I said honestly, but incredibly proud of how you've worked to make things right. Do you think he would like Melissa? I smiled at the boyish uncertainty in his voice. He would adore her. She's authentic, hardworking, kind, all the qualities he valued most. That's what I thought too. Owen set down his cup. I have something to show you. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Opening it, he revealed a simple but elegant diamond ring. It's not flashy, he said almost apologetically. Nothing like what I gave Audrey, but it's honest, like Melissa. It's beautiful, I said sincerely. Are you going to propose not right away? He clarified, closing the box and returning it to his pocket. The divorce won't be final for another month, and even then I think we should take our time. But I wanted to have it ready for when the moment feels right. How will you know when that is? He considered this. When it feels like the most natural next step, not because it's expected or because it's what people do after dating for a certain amount of time, but because we can't imagine our lives without each other in them. I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. You've grown so much, Owen. Learned so much. I had a good teacher, he replied, returning the squeeze, even if I was a slow student. The day Owen left for Boston was bittersweet. I helped him load the last of his boxes into the rental truck, Melissa having driven up the day before to get the keys to her new apartment. Call me when you arrive, I instructed, trying to keep my voice steady. And drive carefully. The forecast mentions possible rain in Massachusetts. I will, he promised, hugging me tightly. And I'll see you in 3 weeks for Thanksgiving. 3 weeks, I repeated. It's not so long. But as I watched his truck pull away, I felt the weight of the distance that would now separate us. Not just the physical miles, but the inevitable separation that comes when a child truly launches into their own life. It was natural, it was healthy, but it still ached in that peculiar way that only a mother's heart can know. Yet mingled with the ache was a profound sense of rightness. Owen was moving toward a future built on truth and authenticity. He was becoming the man I had always hoped he would be. Not wealthy or prestigious by society's standards, perhaps, but rich in integrity, in purpose, in genuine connection. And I was reclaiming my own life, too. The roof replacement began the following day, the first step in a series of renovations that would make my home more comfortable, more efficient, more reflective of my needs and tastes. With my health improving, thanks to consistent physical therapy, I joined a senior yoga class at the community center, reconnected with former colleagues for monthly lunches, even signed up for a weekend photography workshop I'd been eyeing for years. The money that had once flowed out to support Owen's artificial lifestyle now nourished my actual one. It wasn't extravagant. I was still careful, still mindful of my fixed income, but it was enough. Enough for comfort, for small pleasures, for the security of knowing my future held stability rather than precarious sacrifice. 3 weeks later, Owen and Melissa arrived for Thanksgiving. They drove down together, arriving on Wednesday evening laden with wine flowers and a pie from a famous Boston bakery. The apartment's wonderful, Mom, Owen enthused as he helped me prepare vegetables for the next day's feast. You should see the view of the Charles River from my living room window. You'll have to show me pictures, I said, smiling at his excitement. Better yet, you should come visit. Maybe for Christmas, Melissa and I were talking about it on the drive down. Boston is beautiful during the holidays. The lights on Commonwealth Avenue, the skating rink on Frog Pond. I'd like that, I said, genuinely touched by the invitation. From the living room, we could hear Melissa and Evelyn laughing about something. The two had bonded instantly over their shared teaching backgrounds, Evelyn's decades in middle school English and Melissa's occasional guest lectures at environmental education programs. She fits, Owen said quietly, nodding toward the living room. With you, with Evelyn, with this house. She just fits. I understood what he meant. Unlike Audrey, who had always seemed like an exotic bird temporarily perched in our mundane surroundings, Melissa moved through our spaces with comfortable ease, appreciating rather than evaluating, participating rather than performing. Thanksgiving Day brought Evelyn's daughter Amanda, her husband Paul, and their 2 children, Emma 8 and Jack 5. The house filled with noise warmth, the chaotic energy that only children can bring to a gathering. Owen and Melissa joined in enthusiastically, Owen playing endless rounds of Go Fish with the children, while Melissa helped Amanda set the table. As we gathered around the feast turkey with all the trimming side dishes contributed by each guest wine and sparkling cider, I looked at the faces surrounding my table and felt a profound sense of gratitude, not just for their presence, but for the journey that had brought us here, difficult though parts of it had been. Before we begin, I said, raising my glass, I'd like to propose a toast. To family, not just the ones we're born with, but the ones we choose. To honesty, even when it's difficult. And to new beginnings at any age. To new beginnings, they echoed, glasses clinking around the table. Later, as Owen and Melissa helped me wash dishes, Owen nudged me gently. You seem happy, Mom. I am. I realized, somewhat surprised by the simple truth of it. I really am. Owen's divorce from Audrey was finalized just before the new year, a quiet ending to what had once seemed a fairy tale beginning. There was sadness in it, of course, the conclusion of a chapter in his life, the acknowledgement of promises that couldn't be kept, but also relief, the sense of a burden set down after being carried too long. In March, I received another unexpected visitor. Claire Bennett appeared on my doorstep one chilly afternoon, bearing a tin of homemade cookies. I was in the neighborhood for a client meeting, she explained as I invited her in. Thought I'd stop by to see how you're doing. That's very thoughtful, I said, genuinely pleased to see her. Of all the Bennetts, Claire had been the only one to treat me with consistent respect. Coffee, please. As we sat in my freshly renovated kitchen, Claire looked around approvingly. The place looks great. Owen mentioned you were making some updates. You've been in touch with Owen? I asked, surprised. Occasionally. We email. He's the only part of my sister's marriage I was sorry to lose. She smiled ruefully. I always thought he was too good for her, if I'm being honest. And how is Audrey? I ventured, curious despite myself. Better, I think. She's rented a small apartment in the city, thrown herself into her new job, started volunteering at an after-school program in the Bronx of all things. Claire shook her head, still apparently amazed by this development. She's different, more grounded, more real. I'm glad to hear it. She asks about you sometimes, Claire added. Whether I've heard how you're doing, if the money she sent was helpful. It was, I confirmed. Please tell her I put it toward home repairs that were long overdue. Claire nodded. I will. She hesitated, then continued. My parents are a different story. They're still processing everything that happened. The public nature of it all, the scene at Owen's birthday dinner, was particularly difficult for them. I imagine it would be, I said, remembering Catherine and William's horror as the truth was exposed that night. Appearances matter a great deal to them. Too much, Claire agreed. Always have. It's taken me years of therapy to unlearn some of the toxic lessons from our childhood, that status matters more than happiness, that how others perceive you is more important than how you perceive yourself. That's a difficult mindset to escape, I observed. It is, which is why I'm even more impressed by how far Audrey has come. She had it worse than I did, the golden child, the beauty, the one my parents projected all their social ambitions onto. Claire sipped her coffee thoughtfully. In a way, losing Owen was the best thing that could have happened to her. It forced her to face herself, to decide who she wanted to be, without all the external validations she'd been taught to value. Our conversation continued for an hour, touching on Claire's work as an environmental lawyer, her own long-term relationship with a professor at Columbia, her tentative hopes for Audrey's continued growth. When she left, she hugged me, an unexpected gesture that left me momentarily speechless. I'm glad Owen has you, she said simply. Every person deserves at least one person in their life who loves them for exactly who they are. As spring arrived, bringing fresh blooms to my wisteria and new energy to my steps, Owen called with exciting news. I asked Melissa to marry me, he announced without preamble, and she said yes. Owen, that's wonderful, I exclaimed, genuinely thrilled. When did this happen? Last night. We were walking along the Charles River at sunset. It wasn't planned. I've had the ring for months, been carrying it around, waiting for the perfect moment. And suddenly it was just time. I could hear the smile in his voice. It felt right, Mom, like the most natural thing in the world. Tell me everything, I urged, settling into my favorite chair. Did you get down on one knee? What did she say exactly? He laughed. Yes, I knelt down right there on the riverside path, probably got grass stains on my pants. And she didn't say anything at first, just stared at me with these huge eyes. Then she started crying and nodding, and finally managed to say, of course, yes, absolutely yes. That sounds perfect, I said, my own eyes misting over. Have you set a date? Not yet. We're thinking next spring, maybe. Something small and simple, nothing elaborate. He paused. Nothing like my wedding to Audrey. It doesn't need to be, I assured him. The important thing is that it reflects who you are, both of you together. That's exactly what Melissa said. He sounded awed, still slightly disbelieving of his good fortune. We're on the same page about everything, Mom. Finances, future plans, even how we squeeze the toothpaste tube. It's like finally finding the other half of a conversation I've been trying to have my whole life. I thought about those words long after we hung up. The other half of a conversation. Wasn't that what we all sought in our closest relationships? Not someone to impress or appease or perform for, but someone with whom we could speak our truest thoughts, express our authentic selves, and be fully understood. Owen had found that with Melissa. And in my own way, through the painful journey of the past few years, I had found it with myself, that ability to speak my truth, to honor my needs, to refuse to be made invisible. 2 weeks later, I received a small cream-colored envelope in the mail. Inside was a simple card. Melissa Rivera and Owen Thompson request the pleasure of your company at their wedding celebration, Saturday, May 12th, 2024, Botanical Gardens, Boston, Massachusetts. The card was followed by details about the small ceremony and reception that would follow. At the bottom, in Owen's familiar handwriting, was a personal note. Mom, would you do me the honor of walking with me down the aisle? There's no one else I would rather have by my side as I take this step. Love always, Owen. Tears blurred my vision as I read and reread those words. Not just the invitation itself, though, that touched me deeply, but what it represented: Owen's desire to have me visibly, publicly, proudly by his side on one of the most significant days of his life. No more hiding, no more exclusion, no more invisibility. I called him immediately to accept. I stayed with Owen and Melissa for the 3 days leading up to the wedding, helping with last-minute preparations, getting to know Melissa's parents, warm, unpretentious people who had driven up from Pennsylvania, and watching with quiet joy as the couple navigated the pre-wedding stress with humor and mutual support. No cold feet, I asked Owen teasingly on the morning of the wedding as we shared early coffee in his apartment. Not even slightly chilly toes, he assured me with a grin. I've never been more certain of anything in my life. He looked relaxed, happy, his eyes clear and bright with anticipation rather than anxiety. He wore a simple navy suit, no tuxedo this time, with a pale blue tie that matched the spring sky. Your father would be so proud of you today, I said softly. Not because you're getting married, but because of the man you've become, the man you've chosen to be. Owen's eyes glistened. I wish he could be here. He is, in a way, I assured him. In you. In the values you've reclaimed, in the honesty with which you're building this new life. An hour later, we stood together at the back of the garden pavilion, my arm linked through his, watching as the small gathering of guests settled into their seats. Melissa's parents, her brother and his family, colleagues from their firm, friends from Boston and New York. Evelyn sat in the front row, beaming with maternal pride. And to my considerable surprise, at the very back, nearly hidden behind a flowering cherry tree, sat Claire and Audrey Bennett. Owen followed my gaze and nodded slightly. I invited them, he said quietly. It felt right somehow, closing one chapter properly before beginning another. Before I could respond, the string quartet began to play not the traditional wedding march, but a gentle, joyful piece that seemed to blend with the garden surroundings. Melissa appeared at the far end of the path, accompanied by her father. She wore a simple white dress that fell in soft folds to her ankles, her dark hair adorned with tiny white flowers, her smile radiant as she caught Owen's eye. Ready? I whispered to my son. More than ready, he replied, squeezing my arm gently. We walked together down the petal-strewn path past smiling faces and murmured greetings to the front of the pavilion where a judge, a friend of Melissa's family, waited to perform the ceremony. Owen kissed my cheek before I took my seat in the front row, his eyes conveying a depth of gratitude and love that needed no words. The ceremony was brief, but deeply moving, with vows Owen and Melissa had written themselves. Promises not of blind devotion or unquestioning support, but of honest communication, mutual respect, shared purpose, and authentic love. When they exchanged rings, simple bands of polished gold, their hands were steady, their voices clear. By the authority vested in me by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, the judge concluded, I now pronounce you husband and wife. The small gathering erupted in applause as Owen and Melissa shared their first kiss as a married couple, not the showy photographer-ready kiss of his first wedding, but a simple, genuine expression of joy and connection. The reception that followed was equally understated, a luncheon in the garden's glass-walled cafe with flowers from the gardens themselves as centerpieces, a small but exquisite cake, champagne toasts, and conversations that flowed as naturally as the stream winding through the botanical landscape. I found myself seated with Melissa's parents, exchanging stories about our children's childhood escapades, sharing the bittersweet pride of seeing them establish their own lives, finding unexpected common ground despite our different backgrounds. As the celebration continued, I noticed Audrey and Claire preparing to leave. Making a sudden decision, I excused myself and approached them. Thank you for coming, I said sincerely. It means a lot to Owen, and to me. Claire smiled warmly. We wouldn't have missed it. Owen deserves all the happiness in the world. Audrey nodded, her expression a complex mixture of sadness and genuine goodwill. They're perfect together, she said quietly. I can see that now. How are you doing, Audrey? I asked, surprising myself with the genuine concern in my voice. Better, she replied. Different. Learning to define success on my own terms rather than my parents' or society's. She glanced around the simple, elegant reception. This is beautiful, authentic, something I'm still learning to value properly. It takes time, I acknowledged. But you're making progress. Claire tells me you're volunteering now. A genuine smile brightened her face. With an arts program for underserved kids in the Bronx, it's grounding, puts everything else in perspective. As they prepared to leave, Audrey hesitated, then impulsively hugged me. Thank you, she whispered, for being strong enough to tell the truth when the rest of us were too cowardly to face it. After they departed, I rejoined the celebration, watching as Owen and Melissa moved among their guests, their happiness creating a tangible warmth that enveloped everyone present. When they took to the small dance floor for their first dance, Owen caught my eye over Melissa's shoulder and mouthed 2 words. Thank you. Owen and Melissa visit monthly, sometimes staying for a weekend, sometimes just for Sunday coffee under the wisteria. They've settled into their life in Boston with a contentment that radiates from them both. Owen received a promotion at his firm, leading a team developing water purification systems for communities affected by industrial pollution. Melissa has expanded her environmental education work to include consulting with schools on sustainability initiatives. They live in a cozy 2-bedroom apartment near the river, not grand or impressive by Bennett standards, but perfect for them. They manage their finances with careful attention, saving for eventual home ownership while still enjoying small pleasures. Most importantly, they communicate openly about money-making decisions together based on shared values rather than external expectations. Evelyn remains my closest friend and confidant. We travel together, occasionally weekend trips to Vermont, a memorable week in London last fall, enjoying the freedom and financial stability that comes from living within our means. My health has stabilized with regular physical therapy and proper medication. I can walk without pain, now tend my garden without exhaustion, dance at community center events without fear of falling. I hear from Claire Bennett periodically. She sends holiday cards, occasional emails updating me on her life, and sometimes on Audrey's progress. According to Claire, Audrey has found a niche in her new PR firm specializing in nonprofit clients, focused on education and community development. She's dating a high school art teacher, a match that would have horrified her parents and her former self, and has expanded her volunteer work to include mentoring young women transitioning from foster care. Catherine and William Bennett have never contacted me directly, but Claire mentions that they've mellowed somewhat following William's minor heart attack last year. Facing mortality has a way of clarifying priorities, she wrote. They're less focused on appearances now, more interested in actual relationships. Small steps, but meaningful ones. Last month brought the most joyful news of all. Owen called on a Sunday morning, his voice vibrating with excitement. Mom, we have something to tell you, he began, Melissa's voice echoing in the background. We're going to have a baby. I sat down, overcome with emotion. Oh, Owen, that's wonderful. We wanted you to be the first to know, he continued. You're going to be a grandmother. And not just any grandmother, the kind who's involved, who's present, who's an integral part of our child's life. I would love nothing more, I said through happy tears. We're coming down next weekend, he added. There's so much to talk about to plan. Melissa wants your advice on everything from nursery colors to baby names. I can't wait, I told him truthfully. After we hung up, I walked into my garden to the wisteria, now beginning its spring bloom. I sat on the bench beneath it, the same bench where Owen and I had shared countless conversations, where I had nursed so many hurts and hopes over the decades. I thought about the journey that had brought me here, the pain, the betrayal, the $30,000 lost, the years of invisibility. I thought about the confrontations, the revelations, the difficult truths spoken and heard. I thought about the healing, the growth, the restoration of dignity and trust. Had it been worth it? The answer came to me as clear as the spring air, yes. Not because of any dramatic vindication or cosmic justice, but because truth, however painful, creates the only foundation strong enough to support genuine connection. Because standing up for myself had not only restored my dignity, but had ultimately helped Owen reclaim his integrity. Because sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to enable deception, even when confronting it comes at a high personal cost. I know now what I couldn't fully grasp then, that motherhood does not require martyrdom, that love does not demand self-erasure, that helping sometimes means saying no, and that healthy relationships thrive on mutual respect rather than one-sided sacrifice. As I sit under the wisteria watching purple blossoms drift on the spring breeze, I feel at peace. The money that once flowed out of my account to maintain an illusion now enhances my actual life. The son who once valued appearances over authenticity now builds his life on honesty and transparency. And I, who once made myself invisible to support others' deceptions, now stand fully visible, fully present, fully valued. My phone chimes with a text from Owen. Just booked our train tickets for Friday. Can't wait to see you. Love you, Mom. I smile, typing back, looking forward to it. Love you too. Simple words, but behind them lies a world of healing, of growth, of hard-won wisdom. A reminder that it's never too late to reclaim your worth, to demand respect, to insist on truth. A reminder that even after decades of patterns and habits, change is possible. A reminder that the greatest gifts we can give those we love are not financial support or unquestioning acceptance, but honesty, boundaries, and the courage to see them as they truly are. That winter night when Owen mockingly asked, "How does it feel to be completely useless, Mom?" He never expected my answer would change all our lives. But some questions once asked cannot be unasked. Some truths once spoken cannot be unspoken. And sometimes the most loving thing a mother can do is refuse to be invisible any longer. Here beneath the wisteria my husband and I planted the day our son was born, I have found my answer. It feels like freedom. It feels like dignity. It feels like the quiet joy of a life lived in truth rather than shadows. It feels finally and fully like being seen.